We have learnt about the CSU-DSU unit, which is a single equipment that plays a major role in the WAN network. And next, coming to the last device, which is the router. The router acts as an interfacing point between the local area networks and the WAN access port interfaces that helps to get connected with the network service providers. And so these interfaces, it can be a serial connection or it can be any other WAN networks interfaces also. And finally, this router, it needs either the help of a CSU DSU unit or a modem for getting connected to the service provider network. So that is all about the router. Other functionalities remains the same. So thus we have learned the major devices which are used in the WAN space, which are the routers, the modems. First is the we have learned about the dial-up modems, access server, WAN switch, core router, CSU DSU unit, and the router. Next, two important terminologies we'll be using in the network, which is the DCE and the DTE in points, the DTE or the DCE environments or the interfaces. So this DTE, DCE, it's very important. You can look into the picture as it tells the computer side or the host end will be called as the DTE and the network end it is called as the DCE in the WAN space. So DTE first, it is the data terminal equipment. This it tells about whether it is the source or the destination, and it helps in producing the data, and it works in forwarding that data towards the DCE, and that is the work of the data terminal equipment. And the second one is the DCE, which is data circuit terminating equipment. This acts as the interface which can convert the signal from the which it gets from the DTE, and it is transforming it takes care of the transformation process. That is why we have to transform, because the data should be converted to the appropriate format which is needed for the network. So that transformation process is very important, and it is being taken care by the DCE equipment. So it transforms the data which it gets from DTE into the appropriate format needed for the network, and then it sends these data into the network. So these are the activities of the DCE, and one more important thing is it sets the clock rate which is needed. So these are the two major equipments, the DCE and the DTE. Then coming to the types of WAN connections. So three types. We can divide the WAN connections into three types. The leased line, circuit switching network, and the packet switching network. First, about the leased line. So as the name tells, the leased lines are being provided by the service providers. So the lines are being, or the transmission lines are being leased to the companies by the service providers. So for some particular amount of time, this lines, the transmission lines will be sent, will be kept dedicated for a particular organizations. So this will be utilized in case if the organization needs a private network, or if it's want to send some confidential information, the least the lines will be helpful. So that's why it is also called as the dedicated lines. And this is being created to create an point to point. The example is creating a point to point link between the branch offices, so that the organization can share the very confidential resources. That is what about the leased lines, and the data transmission rate can be 64 gigabits per second. So the second one is circuit switching network. The circuit switching network, here the connections are established based on the necessity. So once the data is ready, the connection will be initiated, and after the data transmission is completed, then the connections will be also be terminated. So this is the circuit switching network.